Hey, Sam, you come up with that intro line?
You didn't tell me that was today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Writers' Room with Sam and Jim. On this show, we invite aspiring writers to our podcast, Writers' Room, to help them work on and develop their stories. And you can help us out by going to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and hitting that subscribe button. Or, better yet, rate and review us. You can also join the conversation we're having on Facebook at the Writers' Room with Sam and Jim, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the Sam and Jim. We're going to break some story with Tim Wardell in just a minute, but first, Megan Dane, our co-producer, wants to go off about something. Megan, what's on your mind?
So I was attending a Zoom panel recently on writing and how to break into the business, and I received a piece of advice that, like, the best writing advice you can ever receive comes from William Faulkner.
Oh.
Yeah.
What does he know about writing?
Other than killing his babies.
Oh, yeah. He knew a thing or two, I think, back in the day. I read a few of his books in college, at least I pretended to. But I had never read his acceptance speech for when he received the Nobel Prize for Literature. And this was in 1950, shortly after World War II, in the Cold War. And he articulated a question that has been haunting me. And he also gave an answer for it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today.
Great.
Faulkner said in his acceptance speech, he said, "Our tragedy today is a general and universal physical fear, so long sustained by now that we can even bear it. There are no longer problems of the spirit. There is only the question, when will I be blown up?" Because of this, the young man or woman writing today has forgotten the problems of the human heart in conflict with itself, which alone can make good writing, because only that is worth writing about, worth the agony and the sweat. I would love to be able to say that I thought of this. But
well, if you hadn't ruined it by telling us who did say it, you could have absolutely said that.
That was me.
Could have won your own Nobel Prize.
But something that I have been thinking a lot about is, why are we doing this? Why are we writing? What are we writing about that has any kind of significance? And that being, like, in the world, in the state of affairs today, the world that we live in that's changing in a volatile way on a daily basis, what is the point of what we're doing? And I think that's what his question speaks to. And luckily for me, I don't have to come up with an answer to this, because Faulkner also answered the question.
Oh, thank God.
So he talks about forgetting the problems of the human heart in conflict with itself. And he says he must learn them again. He must teach himself that the basest of all things is to be afraid. And until he does so, he labors under a curse. He writes not of love, but of lust, and of defeats in which no one loses anything of value, of victories without hope, and, worst of all, without pity or compassion. Until he relearns these things, he will write as though he stood among and watched the end of man. I decline to accept the end of man. I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance. The poet's, the writer's duty is to write about these things. It is his privilege to help man endure by lifting his heart, by reminding him of the courage and honor and hope and pride and compassion and pity and sacrifice which have been the glory of his past. The poet's voice need not merely be the record of man. It can be one of the props, the pillars, to help him endure and prevail. And I think that that's given me something to write for.
Wow, that's really, and I feel smarter just having heard it.
You're welcome.
Well, I think there's a couple cool things about that. What's the cool thing for you?
The idea of the writer's privilege being to be one of the pillars to help mankind endure and prevail.
Maybe even more than privilege, necessity. The funny thing is, having read a bunch of Faulkner, as Jim and I did back in college, and we were in a seminar, we actually did
Faulkner and Dickinson.
Yeah, we did a lot of reading for that, but that's a very optimistic, unexpectedly optimistic and powerful thing from Faulkner.
It's interesting, so much of his writing was about what went on in people's hearts in the aftermath of having lost the Civil War.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It was all about how the South should or couldn't deal with all of that.
Right. That's beautiful, Megan. That's a lot for us to carry, though. A lot of responsibility. I liked it when we were writing about fight scenes.
Yeah. Can't I just write a procedural?
Yeah, this is just TV. I'm sorry.
No, you're 100% right. And like we talk about a lot on this show, and you're bringing us right back to that, and thank you for that, which is if it isn't about the character and what's going on with them personally inside, who they are, what they want, it's not about anything at all.
Amen.
Okay, let's get into this week's show. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Sam and Jim.
Hi, Tim. This is Sam. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I've been listening to your show for a little bit now, and it's really cool to be on.
I am really intrigued with your story because it has the word Appalachia in it, or Appalachia, I think, if I said that right.
We say Appalachia where I'm from, but people more south say Appalachia.
Got you. There's more south than Appalachia?
Yeah.
It's a long strip.
Yeah, it goes
right?
all the way down south. It's pretty crazy.
Can we just jump? I hate to do it, but I just want to jump right into your story because it's the one or two sentences that we get ahead of time are so interesting. You grew up. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town called Uniontown, Pennsylvania. It's right on the border of West Virginia in the southwest corner, kind of south of Pittsburgh. So very small town in the mountains, coal mining town, basically the only industry there.
Right.
And my family has been there for a very long time.
And then you left right away. So why did you leave right away the minute you could?
Because I was a mixed race gay boy in a small coal mining town.
I don't
that
understand.
Sound promising.
I don't understand the problem. I don't.
Well, let me tell you. So that was part of it, but yeah, I had dreams of being an actor and something bigger for myself. So literally the week I graduated high school, I moved to New York City.
Did your family completely get while you were moving? I mean, were they on it, bored with it, or how did that go?
No, they were all very supportive, luckily.
Uh-huh.
I was really lucky to have a very supportive family, and
that's good because you probably had to hit them up for money there for a while.
I did. I paid them back. I was good at doing that, but I would, it's New York City, so, and I was this, small town country boy and having no idea of what was what. Yeah, finding my own way there and going to school there. And then I ended up moving to Australia for quite a bit of time when I was 19. And then I was there for 6 years, and then I moved back to the U.S.
New York City was not far enough away from Appalachia.
My family makes that same joke. Yes, it was not far away enough from the coal mines for me to get.
I think what I like about this story, and I didn't have to live it, so I just want to. It's always nice to hear other people's stories. But you went from the place where you were the country boy, black and gay, and then moved to New York, where being black and gay, not unique at all, but country boy, wait a minute, that's what makes you a little different right there.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I got made fun of for my accent in New York City.
Of course.
All the time, but never, for being gay or mixed race or whatever, So it was a turn. It was a turn of events. It was like, wait a minute. And then I moved to Australia where I got made fun of for being an American. So it's just this constant...
And then, so what I'm hearing is anytime you're accepted someplace, you leave.
Exactly. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not used to this. Wait, I need...
Okay, and just a question, what was harder where you grew up, being black or being gay?
I think actually I also preface this with, to be a mixed race gay guy in Uniontown, I was actually pretty lucky. Like, I had supportive friend group. I came out my last year of high school and it was fairly well accepted. And so, I mean, of course there was some homophobia, there was some racism, but comparatively, I felt pretty lucky looking back on it now. But to answer your question, I think being mixed race, was harder just because that's on your,
you can't
hide it.
Right.
Exactly. And also, I think, and this is something that I try to talk about in the script, Gaddy, being mixed race, white and black, or I'm black and Latino and white, not feeling like you fit into either group.
Right.
It has been interesting to navigate. Not so much now as an adult, but as a kid, that's hard to figure out. You're on my black and Latino side, I'm the lightest person in the family. And on my white side, I'm the darkest person in my family. So it's like,
where's the upside?
the upside is that my family, they love me and they accept me. And you learn tools very early on how to navigate different worlds. And so I think it was easy for me to move to New York City or move to Australia because I kind of grew up knowing how to navigate different worlds.
Wow. Interesting. Really interesting. Well, luckily, growing up Black, Latino, white, country, city, international.
Foreigner.
Yeah.
You have all the tools to write TV right away.
Right.
You have it easier than the person who grew up in the,
any one of those slices all by itself.
By itself, right. You've got so many different wells to draw from. So let's talk about your show. Which well or all of them are you going to draw from?
Well, I think that's part of my problem right now that I'm wanting to talk to you guys about, because I think I'm drawing from too many at the moment, and it's getting kind of cluttered.
Right.
But my show is called Gaddy, stands for Gay Daddy, and it's about this social media influencer. He's a self-proclaimed Oprah of YouTube, and the day him and his husband receive a baby for foster, they're looking to adopt eventually, but it's a foster baby, the husband leaves him.
Right.
And his estranged conservative father comes back into the picture, and they eventually decide to raise the baby themselves.
I mean, that's right there is gold to me.
That's the odd couple for this millennium.
It is.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
Right.
So my husband and I, we are in the process of adopting. We were placed with a foster baby last year, actually, during the pandemic, and the baby went back to the biological family earlier this year.
That sounds hard.
Yeah, it was crazy year. Some of the best times and the worst times was last year. But I got the idea for this script because when we were in the adoption classes, just hours and hours of these insane, very intense classes, learning how to be an adoptive parent, they told us a story of this couple that got placed with a baby, and that week the husband left the wife with the foster baby. And I just thought, oh my God, that's crazy. Like, what would that be like? What would that feel like? Like, how would you go about that? And at the same time, I was watching this show called Smilf that's no longer on TV, but it was about this single mom raising her kid alone with the help of her mother. And I thought, you know what? There aren't any stories of a single dad with the help of his dad raising a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how the story came up in my head of what would it be like for your partner to leave, and also a single father with the help of his father raising a kid on their own.
What I really love is the fact that this horrible situation happened to this poor woman where her husband left her with this baby right when they got the baby, and you immediately thought, I'm going to steal that, make a TV show out of
that. Oh, that's great.
Which is
sorry, lady, but thank you for that.
I'm sorry. If only she, someone had gotten killed in the parking lot. That is exactly. I would have done the same thing. I mean,
it's all fodder.
That's all fodder, man. And
it's life, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're all in our highs and our lows, whatever they are. I know we're at a remove. And my wife is kind of sick of it because we're in a moment, and she knows I'm thinking about how how could this fit in something?
Right.
My husband's over that too. So we're all.
I always say this, but please tell me your husband is neither writer nor actor.
No, he is quite the opposite. He's in the military, in the medical field.
Great.
So
okay.
Yes.
As soon as you said military, I was like,
employed
keep going.
and employable.
Great.
It's fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay, good. Whew, okay.
Hold on to that guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they got married. Yeah. All right. First of all, the thing that I'm drawn to, and I was going to say, hey, we can help you with the family stuff because I didn't know if you had kids, but you've had a kid now for a little bit.
Yeah.
And,
well, the kid has gone back to the biological family, but we had him for a year. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you've had the experience.
I've had a kid. I have an 18-year-old. That doesn't make me 18 times more knowledgeable than you about kids. I'll tell you right now.
Okay.
There is a lot of front-loading of information in that first year. And
my God, I had no idea. It was It was pretty crazy, yeah.
That fundamental shift in how you live your life and how you look at the world, right?
Exactly. Well, the really cool thing about it was I actually had a first draft of this script before we had a baby. And it was just a lot of like, set up the line, joke. It was very comedy heavy. And then after having the baby for a year, I was like, and I went back to the script and read it, and I was like, the person who wrote this clearly never raised a child.
100%. 100%.
So,
And Jim and I wrote a teen girl, a father and his teenage daughter who they had a cantankerous relationship. And, I wrote the first drafts of most of that dialogue. And then Jim came in behind me and, fixed it because I know what the conversation is. And he'd heard me talk to my daughter. So it wasn't like I was speaking a foreign language. And he has a teenage son. But my teenage daughter is very, what's the word? She's very loquacious, right? And his son less so. So experience helps. But Jim knew exactly what was going on, just because he has a kid.
Right.
So it's the same all the way around. Let me ask you a question. So this is a half hour, is that right?
Yeah, it started off when it was just comedy. It started off with, I was going to do a short form series. So it was like 10 pages. But now as I'm going through the rewrites and adding more depth, it's at 25 now. But
I wouldn't worry about that, though. Don't worry about
Okay.
the page count. You're in that ballpark. Who cares? Let's get the story right.
Cool.
And it doesn't take much exposure to parenting before comedy turns into tragedy. So you're on your way to drama.
Well, yeah. Now the script is definitely more tragic now.
Now, still more questions though. Is your main character? What's his name?
Remy.
So is Remy black, Latino, white? Any combination? Is there an ethnic or diverse element here or not?
Yeah. So Remy is Latino and white.
Okay. So he's mixed Latino white.
He's mixed.
Okay.
Yep.
And what's his baby? And what's his father?
The baby is white, a little white girl, and the father's Mexican. Manuel is Mexican.
And is he he's obviously traditional? You said conservative, and so
Yep. He's like Catholic, Mexican, traditional. He's lived in America for a long time, but he's kept his traditional roots for sure.
Well, his soul is traditional. That's the key that we're getting at. He's got a belt buckle.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep. And he works with his hands. He's a mechanic, and he's like true blue.
Yeah.
Machismo guy.
Right, and that's great, but. Here's my big question now, of course, is what's the show about? That's the situation. There's a lot of things the show could be about.
Right.
So what's the show about?
So this is exactly this is what I'm trying to figure out, because I have so many ideas that I want to talk about through the show. It's really at the heart. This is what my gut is saying, is that it's about chosen family, really. I mean, even though it's the father and the son raising a baby, but there are a couple best friends as well that come in to help raise the baby. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, it takes a village to raise a child, but that village can look very different than what we traditionally have seen as.
It feels to me like you kind of have to get into the relationship between the father and Remy, right? Because there is something as a parent that you discover, which is the way your children raise you. They affect you as they get older, and the more time you spend with them, they begin to change you. And there's something interesting about, this father is so traditional with a son who clearly is not what he expected or probably wanted when he envisioned that having a son when he was having him.
Right.
What's that feedback loop of now trying to raise another child together from these two different perspectives, and how does that change them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to find this bridge between Remy and Manuel, and the baby is definitely one of them, but I feel like it hasn't been entirely enough, and so I'm trying to find that bridge between them and find that deeper relationship between them, and I think that's something that I'm.
To me, it's kind of we're still a little generic. It's misleadingly specific, but I actually think it's pretty generic, because the conservative father and the not conservative son raising a child together that doesn't strike me. I like it. I mean, I get it. Mm-hmm. The gay thing helps, but I don't know why. Certainly there's no shortage of gay characters, or maybe there's a shortage. I don't know. I don't want to wade into that, but that's certainly common on television. So my question is really about Remy. What is Remy's problem? What does he want that he's not getting? What's the thing that's messing him up? Because I right now, everybody feels very virtuous.
Remy, his mother left when he was 11. And so it was Remy and his dad raising him. And then his dad kicked him out when Remy came out as a teenager. And so I'm trying to find this, Remy's always looking for acceptance. And I think that's why he stumbled into social media. He ended up starting this show that he was actually initially trying to help people. And he started getting very popular, and he kind of got caught up in that world of this fake social media world. And he's kind of become a different person now. and he's kind of become self-involved and always worried about his image. And so through the story, I kind of want to find a way to where Remy finds his way back to his original self. Like he finds his way back to that caring person that thought about others and the initial reason why he started this show. And I'm trying to use the baby and his father to kind of get him there.
Interesting. I get that. All right. So, Jim, I have some thoughts.
Go ahead.
I have a couple thoughts here I've been writing down. First of all, in order, his father threw him out.
Which seems huge.
Yep. Huge, right? You didn't get tossed out. I almost called you Remy. You didn't get tossed out, thank God, Tim. And
no.
But we all know people who have. I'm sure you know more people who have because they were gay.
Yeah, it's quite common.
Yeah, and it's got to be brutal, of course,
right,
in so many ways. So now the twist to it for me, and this is what I'm going to pitch, the idea that Remy is selfish is great, or self-centered, or self-involved.
Self-focused, yeah.
I would pitch that Remy wants to be loved by his father, because that's simple. It's not interesting enough yet. And he's using the daughter to get close to the father, right? Because the grandfather loves the daughter. The daughter's not a character, by the way, because she's a baby. Unless you age her up, she just exists as a doll in a blanket.
Right.
But what's going to come out is that the father did toss him and maybe regrets it, but he doesn't like his son because he's selfish. And that's what Remy has to deal with. It's not this narrative that he's created of, oh, my father's conservative Catholic, tossed me out, which is true, but it made Remy into this somewhat unlikable person to his father, which is very twisted because the father created that in him, maybe, but with his own closed-minded thinking. Let me just see, does any of that land, Tim? Before Jim's going to land on it too.
I just want to hit what you're saying, though, which is that goes to the question, which is how do they wind up together again? What's the circumstance where he goes back to his dad, kicked him out? How does he come back to the dad with the baby?
Yeah, I like that. I that does resonate with me because eventually the father's kind of down and out at the moment. When he comes back, when we get to the pilot, this part in their story is the father kind of loses his job because he's a kind of curmudgeon kind of character. He doesn't like people. Remy's this person that's gregarious and wants a lot of people around him. His father's the opposite. He's kind of rude, and so he ends up losing his job. He gets kicked out of his apartment, and because Remy's really the only person in his life, even though they have this tumultuous relationship that's very distant, he's still the only real person in his life. So he's been depending on Remy. Remy's given him money for his rent a couple of times. So Remy's really the only person in his life that he can go to once he's kicked out, and he's just like, I need a place to stay.
I like that.
I do too.
I think that's really...
It's a nice reversal.
It is. It's not. It's the prodigal son returns kind of thing, or anything like that. Even though he was tossed, I love the toss thing because it's so horrible.
True.
So when he does come back, it's this, and the baby's there. Remy sees in him his natural paternal instincts. Like he takes the baby and he instantly kind of falls in love with this baby and ends up taking care of the baby more than Remy in the beginning.
Right.
Because he just knows what to do. Remy's kind of lost.
He's
also no idea how to take care of the baby.
He's a grandfather too, which is
right.
I got a ways to go, but I'm really looking forward to some payoff here.
Because you get to hand him back.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that. But this is a love story, right? Isn't it? Right? It's a love story between a father and a son, a very difficult one. It's a love story between the grandfather and it's between all three. It's like a three-way between the grandfather, the son, and the child. And I kind of wonder if you might want to age up that kid because you get nothing there. And that you may want that, but I point to Modern Family where when they had actually the gay couple, Cam and Mitch,
right.
When they had a kid, they aged that kid up as fast as they could.
Yeah.
And no one talked because they needed something to respond to that, you know?
And she was a great spicy little character on her own.
She was.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But it is a love story between those two men, I think, in a different way. And it's in your title, right? I mean, it's Gay Daddy, Gaddy, and it's about these two dads. And to me, that's the part that resonates. So the ancillary characters, whatever they are, the rest of the family, it's not really about making a new family with these people, is it? If you agree it's about this central love affair, then I think those other characters, which you got to have, they serve that story in some way.
No, that's really resonating with the love between them, the two of them. If I can keep that as my touchstone as I'm writing and going through, I think that'll help me focus the story more and be able to then weave the other themes that I have in without it being confusing. If I can just stay on, the storyline between the father and the son.
I think you have an element here of, you have the son dealing with this young child, whatever age you make it, and his father is going to see himself with Remy doing that same thing, right? There's that echo chamber of, it's very hard, I think, for anyone who has children, any decent person who has children, not to feel love for a little child, right? Like you
Right.
naturally have that resonance. And, Remy's going to be looking at his dad being so loving with this child, and then he's going to know that they had that too, right? He's going to remember it, he's going to see it, and that feels like a basis for something to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that just set off a thought for me, is that Remy sees his father with the baby and it just comes natural. He notices how natural that is for him. And I think maybe, Remy has had these resentments for all these years for his father kicking him out and him feeling not loved by his father. But then maybe that kind of clicks for him, like, oh, wait, no, my father raised me. Even though he kicked me out, and he did raise me through almost my entire childhood because his mother wasn't there. So I think that's a really strong vein to hit for his character, and will give me a lot to work with if he realizes, like, oh, wait, no, my father wasn't as, even though he kicked me out, and that is horrible, there is some aspects to him that is that.
Well, he's measuring his dad on his dad's worst day, the worst thing he
right.
did. But everything up until that point was maybe more mixed towards the positive,
Mm-hmm.
a more normal relationship, because there's nothing normal about kicking your kid out. It's just no way.
But that could also be reversed for Manuel, the father, seeing Remy eventually come into his own as a good father and changing his mind about
Right.
Remy and what it means to be gay even, and what it means to be a modern father, and what,
I think that's a longer term thing, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'm less interested in the reconciliation of the father, Manuel, with the gay part of his son, only because it's not that we've seen enough of those stories. I don't think we can ever have enough of those stories.
I think that's not necessarily about the gay part as the son part.
Yes.
Right? It's that, like, as you say, worst days in people's lives. And for each of them in some way to see that, to be reminded of the redeemable part of the other, the thing that they do love in the other. I think that gives you, because they can still, argue about all kinds of stuff that's surface, but some element of that reconnection and seeing that there are things they love in the other would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then also, I'm also wondering about, like you said, it is a long-term, like that, I'm going to have to stretch that out, right, through the series to keep the tension between them and conflict.
You're not going to have to stretch that, though.
There will always be conflict raising a child.
Yeah, and also you're not going to resolve it in the first episode. That's the mistake that we end pilots on questions, not answers usually, right? And my father and I have our own issues. My father did not throw me out, but we have our own issues. It's just like I do with my parent, and I'm sure, I don't know how my daughters could ever have issues with me as we grow up, but I'm sure they will manufacture something. But
they will figure it out.
Yeah.
He will eventually correct them.
But the point is they don't resolve. They just fade. They become less. They're like pimples. They don't. You don't have a flare up every now and again. But I yelled at my parents. Not yelled, but I was very not happy about something. I have been yelling about them for decades, and they're not going to change. I know they're not going to change. And every now and again, I just get cranky about it. And I just say, this is bullshit. And they say whatever. And then I'm like, all right, it's not going to change. And then later I'll go to home and my wife will say, you should really talk to them about that thing. And I'm like, this isn't television.
This isn't an unknown.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This isn't Gay Daddy, where I get to now talk to my dad and then we come to an understanding and it's all fixed. This is a chronic condition, man. And that's what I'm saying is you're in a chronic condition, and that's okay. Yeah. That's great. And even I think on Modern Family, which I watch a bunch of seasons, when you go to the end, Mitch was always talking about the fact that his father was a much better grandfather, more patient, and all the different ways he was a dick growing up were coming out every season. It was a sly comment or Mitch getting upset about something, and all that, and also his daughter too, Mitch's sister. I remember her name. But, all that's Claire. But all that stuff, it just comes up, man, over and over. But I just want to say, for the writing of the pilot, because you kind of talked about what was driving you crazy. If it's about this relationship/love story, which I always go to love stories because they really focus me. And Jim and I both love love stories. It's between two men. It's between a father and a son. But if we just look at it as a love story, it helps structure the whole thing, too.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. Like that really, once you said that, I didn't think about it as a love story. But as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, yeah, like that's the vein that I need to start.
And that's it, by the way.
Working through.
That is it.
Because everything else is tinsel.
Yeah, well, it colors it.
Yeah.
You know, right? You're right about tinsel. You're right. Some things are really tinsel. What Jim's talking about is some things really, we call them filigree sometimes. They're like just flourishes, right? They're not to the core.
Mm-hmm.
But you can have things that go to that core of that relationship that are Mexican or gay or urban versus rural, whatever those colors are to them.
Right. But those are still kind of reflections of that central theme.
100%.
Exactly. Yeah, they're just like fit. They're just like clothes for that central theme. Just it makes it specific to them. But
Right.
right.
And if it's not related to that central theme, then toss it.
Right.
And by the way, that's a too blanket of a rule, but it'll keep you on track. So you might lose a couple nice moments because you're like, no, that's not really relevant, and really,
Which is so hard.
Yes, it is.
Well, let me help
Probably
you with something.
the term killing your baby is not right for this situation.
No, I think it's actually exactly right, because
What you do is you put it up for adoption, and you bring it into another script and foster it there down the road.
That is true.
Yeah,
we do that. But Tim, believe me, once you get a baby, killing babies will make a lot more sense.
It's funny because it's true.
It's true.
So true.
I had that moment where my eldest was a baby in a crib and inconsolable. I'm alone with her, abandoned by my wife, and I just put her down in the crib and she's wailing, stepped out of the house, smoked a cigarette I think it took like 1 second, just like, I don't even know where I had a cigarette, but I found it, before I went back in there. She's wailing. And I'm like,
I remember the day
discovered. I was there, yeah.
Earplugs. Man, that 2 a.m., 3 a.m. crying, you put in the earplugs, and suddenly it's all so much better.
Yeah, he's full of shit.
It's the small little things when you're in those moments that you just...
Jim was not a hard ass about that stuff. He broke pretty fast. Faster than his wife, as it turns out.
Broke how?
Well, gave in, like when the cries they would.
Oh, we never tried to. Well, we didn't have that mode of parenting. We were always like, when the baby cries, you go to the baby.
Yeah.
That was we didn't do the.
Well, I thought the moment I got a lot of respect for his wife, Lisa, was when Jim said they had a baby monitor and the baby's crying, and she turned the baby monitor off. And I was like, holy smokes!
Yeah,
that's great.
We started with we were just in a 1-bedroom apartment, so
there you go. That's
started with baby monitors. And then a couple months into having the baby, we were like, why do we have, this is just adding to the torture of it. We have baby monitors in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, when they're crying. We
can clearly hear the screaming. So we definitely turned those off too.
To continue on the love story, I want to bring up a thing to the way it progresses, because I don't think Manuel is going to accept this gay thing in a pilot, obviously, right?
No.
So there was on Rescue Me, the Dennis Leary show way back. One of the hard asses, I think it was like the second command of the show, and he was like, you just feel like this is a guy who grew up on the island. He's just like, and he was in his 50s, and his son, who's also I think a fireman, came out as gay, and it took him a minute to accept it, but he accepted it, and he was fine with it, but he just needed to know who was the man and who was the woman in the relationship. And his son wisely said, I am the man in the relationship. And that made it okay for him.
Right.
And they milked it a little bit, because they were like, okay, his son's like, all right, I'm still lying to my dad, but at least I got this. And then they were comfortable. They could all go out together. They could go to a bar together. It was all that. And then, of course, later on, it was revealed that things were not necessarily quite so black and white, which then his father was like, God, it's like I accepted that. Now I have to accept this. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of it's like when my brother married a Catholic girl. We're Jewish. And then there was that, okay, I accept it, but we're still going to have a rabbi at the Catholic ceremony. So right. And then, oh no, there's a Christmas tree. What do we do?
Add a menorah next to it.
Well, they did have a menorah. They kept all that stuff, but then my stepmother brought an ornament for the tree. Right. This is little, right. So it's these little. It's not all accepted in the middle. In the beginning, it's a constant thing. You're just going to challenge every time. Poor Manuel is like, I'm cool now. I accept all aspects of this. You will find a new aspect that will challenge him. Like, he brings his son's like, oh, I got a boyfriend. I'm going to bring him to the family reunion. And he's like, Manuel, no. Well, they all know I'm gay. Yeah, but, because Manuel's going to hang out with all his old coots, and they're going to make a comment, and Manuel is going to make his belt buckle's going to turn red.
Feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I also want to play with that with with Remy as well, like accepting his father and kind of bridging the gap the other way too. Like,
right.
No matter what side you're on, you can close out the other side too. Even if you're, liberal and you're supposed to be open-minded, the other side can't be completely wrong about everything.
That's right. That's right.
And so I kind of want to explore with Remy as well, that idea of him slowly accepting his father as this is who he is. This is his point of view of the world and where he comes from, and how to blend those two things together. So yeah, I guess I shouldn't, if both of them are working at that, I guess I shouldn't worry about conflict down the road.
No. I'm saying there would be an infinite amount of conflict, even if they were both straight, both everything, there would be.
And the smaller and more specific the thing you do every time you come to something, make it really concrete, and you'll have an endless well of conflict.
Yeah.
Even on the same topics, they'll come back.
Yeah. I mean, I think I use the word generic a lot when Jim and I are writing, because I'm like, okay, that's generally true and it works, but without specifics, I don't know if it's any good. I just like, that's just a form. And that's where we started with this, right? Generic's wrong because it's not generic, but it's in the core.
It's unformed.
It's do I know if it works? Is it going to sustain? And for me, it was when you said that, Remy had a channel and it's all about him and he's selfish or whatever he is. And I was like, okay, now we're getting to specifics about Remy. That's unrelated to him being gay, unrelated to him being a dad. It's just him. What I love about that is you cannot be selfish when you have a kid.
Yeah.
Because the kid gives you nothing. I mean, they give you love. They give you love, but they don't do anything to help until, it depends on the kid. At some level.
And they show you yourselves, right? Like, I can see the thing where the dad is pointing out the little girl running around, and she's talking to herself in, like, a book or something where she's pretending to be Remy, doing his social media broadcasting, right?
If the girl's a little older.
That's the slightly older version, right? And he's suddenly seeing himself. He's going, oh, shit.
Oh,
that's
man,
me?
yeah, like, that's what I sound like, yeah. That's great.
That's good as long as it's relevant to the love story. And let me make it relevant. When it comes to parenting, Manuel is 100% generous, or very generous anyway. And Remy isn't. Remy resents it. He resents the baby. And I think every parent has resented a child at some point.
Perhaps all the points.
But some people forgive themselves like in a second, and some go to therapy. But you definitely have that resentment, but I don't think Manuel does. Well, first of all, he's not the dad, but also he's just fundamentally less of a self-centered, selfish person.
Which is a nice contradiction for the character, right? That he's so giving, but he threw him out, right? And now Remy has brought in this child, but he's actually a very selfish person.
Well, he threw him out because he's going to hell, and he doesn't want to be part of that.
That's yeah.
Or
I have a line in a later episode of that, yeah.
Well, there's no later episode. Let's disabuse you of that right now, Tim, right? Just keep that in mind.
Only the pilot.
Only the pilot right now.
Right.
That's the one. That's the one. We just got to get this pilot to get you a job or get you, something else. But by the time you get to that, you'll have plenty of help.
Is it because Remy's going to hell, or is it because Manuel failed?
I think it's shame.
Well,
I think it's shame.
There's multiple layers there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different pieces to that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many. Yeah. It's so...
Well, and I'm saying shame that he failed is what that's that element of, not shame.
As a father.
As a father.
Right.
Exactly.
I didn't raise him right.
And I think, Manuel sees this as a chance to redeem himself if he can be a better grandfather to this child than he was a father to Remy.
Let me propose that he does not see that way, but that he comes to understand in the pilot that's why he's doing it.
He
reaches that understanding.
He doesn't know that's why he is getting involved with his son. But what he realizes over the pilot is what you just said.
Okay.
Because in what you're pitching, Manuel doesn't show up in order to help with the child. He shows up because he has his own problems.
Right.
And then begins to participate, and he can have that realization.
And Remy in the big end can say, get the fuck out of my house. He's throwing his father out just like his father threw him out. And that's when his father says to him, I have nowhere else to go, but I want a chance to not make the mistake with her that I made with you.
Exactly.
And that'll break his heart, break my heart, and that's it. That's on that side. And then Remy should probably say, no, you can't stay. Because then we got to get to, and I don't mean to be writing this terrible scene, but the idea then Remy won't do it because he's selfish and he's angry. But maybe that's what your ancillary character can do for them. You say, you're being selfish.
Remy, don't you see?
It's that thing. It's that's
how the two best friends that has been their point. The reason why they're there, they're this like dividing, guiding light for both of them, really. This objective point of view of learning, like, you guys are, you're wrong on this, you're wrong on this.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's great, as long as it's not. And by the way, I think A to B to C is smart in simple in shows like this, because when you get all the specificity and you have it can get a little confusing.
Right, that's really all you have room for is A to B to C.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I read a script that someone wrote. His thing is he was afraid that everything was going to be too obvious and too clear. Consequently, it was very atmospheric, but I didn't know what the hell was going on half the time. Right? And so because so many details were worked out, and it was so, had a very Blade Runner kind of feel, but which I loved, but I didn't know what was going on, and I think we just have to lay it out. And towards that end, when you write it, I would recommend writing the Schmaltzy version. Like
going overboard with the feelings of it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I heard this on another podcast. They called it the Schmaltzy version, though I've heard it in other ways from other people.
This is not a secret trick.
It's not a secret trick.
It's very useful. It's a tool.
Yeah, where you basically have the character say what they mean on the nose,
right? Okay.
And not try to rewrite it yet in a scene. And it's something I wish I'd done earlier in my learning curve.
It helps tell you whether or not you have a scene.
Yeah.
Is there actually conflict? What do they both want?
Because when I spoke to older writers about how, not older, but more senior writers when we were starting out, they would say, "Oh, I do my spew draft, and then I just get through it."
Term.
Yeah, and that's their spew draft. They just write it out. But I didn't like that, because I really wanted to figure out the scene and get into it and have the character. And I would write. I'm not saying my first draft was great. It was not. But I didn't want to just spew it out to get through it. And then I realized later that what they were doing was, in their spew, they were having the character say exactly what they meant, which just keeps you focused on what the scene is about while you're doing it, right? And then
and then you can go back and
take it off the nose. Yeah,
it's so easy when you're writing dialogue to have a turn of phrase or someone says something, you go, "Oh, that's really interesting," and you fall down a rabbit hole of chasing that interaction. Yeah. But it has nothing to do with what you're actually trying to say in your scene.
Right.
Yep. I'm definitely that person that follows the glittery idea that I've come up with that I think so brilliant.
Me too, Tim.
and then I go back, a couple of days later, I'm like, what the hell was I? What was that? Yeah. It either sounds cool or it looks great, but it has nothing to do with what I actually want to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens there a lot of times in the process, and this is a little nuts and boltsy, but this happens a lot to me and Jim, is one of us will write, we say something, and then it is relevant, but we use turns of phrase that refer back to that central thing. And then at the end, it's like, and then we do have a button that refers back to that first thing. But then when you rewrite the scene, and those first things change, and you realize, oh, now the end doesn't make any sense because it's referring back to something that didn't happen, and it's just too over-connected. And in terms of language, where it just needs to be connected in terms of ideas. And then at the end, after you rewrite it, you can make it.
Once you know you're keeping the scene, then you can go through and reskin the language.
Yes. And, and I think that's I'm sure everyone works a little differently, but if you're a person that is having trouble killing babies, then I would say just have fewer babies first. Right? Just don't get attached to those babies by not having them.
Do some contraception first.
Yeah, just a little
writing contraception.
Writing contraception. Stick to the thing about the whole thing.
It's kind of like in vitro. You do a bunch and then you only keep one. I don't know.
Too far. Now you just said make lots of babies. You're killing the metaphor. JR, cut this out.
Right.
Okay.
Actually, go back about 45 minutes. And
Tim, it's a pleasure.
Total pleasure.
Hey, thank you guys so much. This was great. Your podcast has helped me out a lot, specifically with this, and this is helping me even more. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim. And that's all we've got for you this week. Our producer, J.R. Zamora-Thal, is working the mixing board.
Our logo was designed by Julien Debar-Monclair, and our music was provided by Buddha Rays out of Austin, Texas.
If you want to get in touch, we are at The Sam and Jim on Instagram and Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook and YouTube as The Writers' Room with Sam and Jim.
And if you like hanging out in the room with us, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And tell a friend, would you, so we can get JR paid. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.